Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 10, Text 4, Translation and Commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Kamang Vavarsha Parjanya.
Kamang Vavarsha Parjanya.
Sarva Kama Dughamahi.
Sarva Kama Dughamahi.
Shishikchu Smag Brajangava.
Shishikchu Smag Brajangava.
Ayasodhasvatir Muda.
Ayasodhasvatir Muda.
I'm very happy to see all of you here. Some of you are coming very long distances at considerable expense. I can understand that you must be happy to be here also. Otherwise you wouldn't come year after year after year to live for some days in rather austere conditions. Not as austere as Dobre Mush, but still somewhat. But why do you come?
I come to hear you.
Okay, well that was a rhetorical question. I was going to give the answer myself. Well, why does anyone do anything? People do everything for happiness. The happiness here is hearing and chanting about Krishna in the association of devotees. Satang prasangang namavirya samvido bhavanti hritkarna rasayana kathaha tadjoshvanadashva pavargavatmani shradharatir bhaktir anukramishati. Anyone know the translation to this verse? Important verse that Srila Prabhupada often quoted. If you read his books regularly, you'll find this is regularly quoted. Anyone? Can say? Balarama Acharya? This verse is spoken by? No, it's by Kapila Deva. Mama Virya. Mama means my. So this is spoken by Kapila.
In association of devotees, Krishna Katha makes the heart joyful. And thus, the man who undergoes it purifies gradually. And true devotion
Right.
takes
So,
place in this.
in the association of devotees, discussions of my glories, Kapila Dev says, becomes very pleasing to the heart and the ears, and it is rasayana. It is like a tonic. One who hears in that way advances on the path of liberation from material bondage, and his faith, feeling for Krishna, and pure devotion develop in order. So Krishna consciousness makes us happy, and you've all come here to be happy, hearing and chanting about Krishna in the association of devotees. I attend such Shravan Kirtan camps under the name of a Shravan Kirtan camp or any other name, quite a few in each year. In India we have many brahmacharis, so there are many brahmacharis present as well as householder devotees. But generally we find that the householders, they feel more inspired to attend such festivals than the brahmacharis. Because the brahmacharis, they have daily, rising early, full morning program, and is supposed to have a full evening program, but all-day absorption in Krishna service. Whereas most of the grihastas, they have to spend most of their time in activities which are not directly connected to Krishna consciousness, and mostly in the association of non-devotees. If we ask most of the initiated devotees in the world today, how many hours a day on average can you spend in directly Krishna conscious activities? Then usually we may get an answer, 2, maximum 4. And what is the quality of that time? Chanting Hare Krishna, watching the kids so that they don't kill themselves or kill each other in their play. And even if you're chanting, you're thinking about, well, I have to go to the bank, I have to go to the market, and some boss that is harassing me so much at work, and so on and so on. So that our Krishna consciousness is just a break, a little break in between struggling within the material energy. Now, you may wonder what I just said has got to do with the verse and the purport. Now, in this purport, Srila Prabhupada gives a scathing indictment of modern so-called advanced society. And he speaks of how human life is meant for simple living and high thinking. This was a theme that Srila Prabhupada wrote about, preached about, even before he came to the West. This first canto of the Bhagavatam, which we just spoke from, was compiled by Srila Prabhupada before he came to the Western world. Srila Prabhupada wrote this in the 1960s in Vrindavan. He was commuting between Vrindavan and Delhi. If we were to go back in a time machine or by nostalgic thoughts to the early 1960s in India, we think, oh, it was very nice, very traditional at that time. But even at that time, Srila Prabhupada noticed and noted the breakdown of the culture into the factory culture, the Ugra Karma culture. He had personally lived through the Second World War, including the bombing of Calcutta. He was sitting in Calcutta with bombs raining down. So living as an practically unknown and seemingly insignificant mendicant in Vrindavan and Delhi, Srila Prabhupada wrote these books as a blueprint for a new world civilization. Srila Prabhupada came to fulfill Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's prediction that Krishna consciousness would be preached in every town and village of the world. But along with his purely spiritual message of chanting Hare Krishna and hearing about Krishna, Srila Prabhupada also wanted to effect a major change, a total change, a revolution in the whole course of world civilization. Because the modern lifestyle based on sense gratification does not go well with cultivation of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada wanted to establish communities, agrarian communities based on simple living and high thinking. Now, it's not that Maya is not there in the village. It's not that simply by moving to the land one becomes self-realized. And we see that village people in Russia, they're not generally very spiritually enlightened. But if one takes up simple living with the specific motive of high thinking, of cultivating Krishna consciousness, that is a very good combination. But if we think, well, I'll just move to the village and that will automatically be favorable for my Krishna consciousness, well, we'll have to think again. For high thinking to flourish in an atmosphere of simple living requires a whole change of outlook. As the saying goes, you can take the man out of the city, but you can't take the city out of the man. in this lifetime we're programmed from childhood to live a life very much in the mode of passion, with the idea that we have to work to get money, to live. So we have a mindset which is very deeply ingrained with all the subtle thought patterns that go with it. So we need to be re-educated, purified from the wrong ideas which are very deep in our consciousness. Otherwise, we may go to the village and chant Hare Krishna but become discontent. Discontent because it's not enough in the mode of passion. I heard many years ago that in America, people from big cities like New York City, if they went to the country for a break, they wouldn't be able to sleep at night because there wasn't the sound of so many sounds of traffic and people screaming and sirens, which they're used to at night.
Devotees or just me?
No, commies. It was just too quiet, and it felt strange to them. Otherwise, people naturally they feel content in a situation where there's enough food, clothing, and shelter. I'm talking about being content on the material platform. To be content on the material platform is not a good qualification for advancing in spiritual life. But even if one is discontent, living in the city, but is fully tied into that city way of life, that discontent will not be enough to propel one forward in spiritual life, simply because one won't have enough time to engage in Krishna consciousness. But if we move to the village, and with the idea of cultivating Krishna consciousness, but we become discontent on the material platform because it's just so different to the city, then again that becomes a disqualification for advancing in Krishna consciousness. Practically, I've seen over the last 40 years or so how Indian village life has been practically totally destroyed. The villages are still there, but the outlook of people has changed. In many ways, the consciousness is the same as in the cities. Everything is based on getting money. If we analyze historically from the Vedic viewpoint, there's been a gradual degradation in time in India and all over the world. That is predicted that in Kali Yuga everything will degrade in the course of time. But especially this Western culture of materialism swept all over the world with colonialism, and people with taking great difficulty came all the way from Europe to for merchant, or what do you call it, business. And to further their business interests, they would fight with each other, they would fight with local people, they took power in different places. India was taken control of by the British, not by the British government, by a trading company called the East India Company, British East India Company. So their whole attitude in coming, later they said, well, we're doing it as missionaries or to help the Indians, but actually their massive endeavor they took was for the sake of business. And gradually they infiltrated their values into Indian society. Of course, even Europe wasn't like that always. It was an extremely religious society at one time. Of course, we're speaking in very broad generalities here. But definitely the Western culture, or the aspect of Vedic culture which came to India, was very much materialistic, based on exploitation, and willingness to break down all resistance to their plans, even by killing people, starving people, and all over the world people picking up this culture with some resistance. The most prominent resistance is that of Islamic, what they call extremist groups, or whatever you want to call them. But even they use military technology developed in the West. And many of them, or at least some of them, so I'm told, they also like to listen to these young soldiers. They like to listen to Western pop music, which isn't very Islamic. So we want to re-establish as far as possible the traditional Vedic culture centered on Krishna consciousness. Not necessarily that we want to try and make everyone into an Indian villager, but to make a situation in which people will generally be happy, living simply, being content with what God gives via His material energy, the land, and thus affording everyone a favorable opportunity for cultivating Krishna consciousness. So like I said, most of the grihastas, they can only get a little time every day for engaging in Krishna consciousness. What we're finding in our pilot farm projects in India is that the grihastas who live there, they actually have more congregational hearing and chanting than do the brahmacharis in the temples. Because generally the brahmacharis in the temple, they have a full morning program. And often in the evening they're out preaching because, life goes on till quite late at night in the Indian cities. But in particular, one farm in Gujarat, they have a morning program, a midday program, and an evening program with all the devotees coming together. And during the day, they're with devotees, only with devotees. They may be alone, for instance, with the bulls plowing the fields. But they're free to sing the names of Krishna as they work. I wonder how many of you who go to work can do that. So this simple living and advancement in Krishna consciousness, they go together very well. Whereas living in this hellish, demoniac, exploitive, so-called civilization, it drains the very energy of the living being. In that atmosphere where there's a lot of hearing and chanting together, one actually has to develop a taste for it or he can't stay. If we're hearing and chanting about Krishna for many hours in every day, we have to get a taste for it, otherwise we'll feel disgusted and we wonder, if we're thinking of other things we can do, there's nothing much you can do in a place where there's nothing to do except chant Hare Krishna. There's nowhere to go, there's no TV or cell phone or computer to engage with. So one actually is forced to have a taste for hearing chanting about Krishna, otherwise one can't stay. But actually we're finding that the devotees who do stay, they become very happy. Because on one hand they're not getting their blood squeezed out by this exploitive civilization. And on the other hand, they're chanting Hare Krishna a lot and engaging in hearing about Krishna a lot. And this gives happiness to the soul. So simply by engaging in this program, one can very easily come to the spiritual platform. Whereas if one is living in an atmosphere surrounded by so many distractions, well, what happens? Distractions, that's described? Distractions from one's pursuit of spiritual advancement is described as, in Bhagavad Gita, as Bahushaka, many branches. Many branched intelligence. Vivasayatmika buddhir ekeha kurunandana bahushaka hyanantascha buddhio vivasayinam. One whose intelligence is one-pointed, it speaks of one-pointed intelligence and then distracted intelligence by which one cannot fix the mind. And then Bhogaishvarya prasaktanam tayaparita chetasam vevasayamika buddhi samadhona vidhiyate. Then one who is very attached to worldly opulence, sense gratification, such a person cannot get one-pointed intelligence, spiritual one-pointed intelligence. So the modern civilization is distracting us. Always so many things, so many advertisements on TV, on billboards, everywhere. Sometimes I used to see Indian TV. My lectures were recorded and put on Indian TV. So one or two times I looked to see how it was when it was being broadcast. And every 10 minutes or so they'd have a break for advertisement. And in the advertisement, practically no picture would be shown for more than 1 second. Always changing, so fast. And I was saying, how can you go from just sitting watching someone giving a lecture to something, it's just completely agitating. And people, they equate that agitation of the mind with pleasure. And each scene that is shown, that is some scene of sense gratification. So they may be selling something as prosaic as toilet cleaner. But somehow they make it out like, if you buy this toilet cleaner, then your life becomes full of variegated sense gratification. In your home, everyone will be bombarded by the ecstasy of ever-changing rasas of material enjoyment because you have that toilet cleaner in your toilet. It's stupid, but somehow or other it seems to work. They wouldn't advertise unless they made a profit by doing so. And although the example of toilet cleaner is it's clearly not anything that's really going to boost up our happiness. You enter the toilet and see that container of toilet cleaner and you faint in ecstasy. It doesn't happen like that. So you might think, well, that's a stupid advert. But then if you see an advertisement for a big car, you really get happiness from that. But actually it doesn't happen. Maybe you've seen children, when you give them a new toy, they become very excited, they play with it for 3 or 4 minutes and then they leave it. Or maybe 3 or 4 days, and then they're fed up with it. So in the same way, if someone gets some new car and then they feel very good, but after a short time, that's the nature of Maya, the fascination wears off. The lasting value or that one can have from having a big expensive car is the prestige factor, that you can imagine yourself to be superior to others because you have a car which is more expensive than others. And the same thing goes, big house, expensive saris, or business suit. But this is all very petty. Happiness of the soul comes from chanting Hare Krishna. And that requires a simple mindset. Simple means one is not interested in sense gratification, nor in showing oneself to be better than others. One is genuinely happy to live with others, just hearing and chanting about it. And that simple living, that helps to reinforce that simplicity of consciousness, which is necessary for pure devotional service. Of course, in most cases, it's not going to be that someone simply moves from the city to the land and they shed all their anarthas or unwanted habits, including mental habits. But there is the process of anartha nivriti, of becoming free from unwanted obstacles which impede our advancement in Krishna consciousness. Of course, many or most of us find that to get beyond the stage of having anarthas in our heart seems to be very difficult. But of course we have to go even beyond this. Tato anartha nivriti tato nishta to nishta, ruchi, asakti, bhav and prema. But we can't rise up to that if we're stuck on the platform of being in the platform of having so many anarthas, unwanted things within the heart. And for most devotees it's very difficult to rise up beyond the modes of nature when they spend most of their time every day interacting with situations and people that are fully engrossed with the modes of nature. Something is there, undoubtedly. Those devotees who go on serving Krishna in whatever situation, they're very glorious. But for many devotees, simply to survive in Krishna consciousness year after year seems to be their main achievement. We're very happy to see so many devotees coming year after year after year. I'm seeing them coming to these festivals. So they're staying steady in Krishna consciousness. That is laudable. But still they have to spend so much time every day doing things that they don't really want to do just to maintain the body so that they can have 2 or 3 hours a day of chanting and hearing about Krishna. So in many cases it's something like putting petrol on a fire with one hand and pouring water on the other. Some kind of fire continues, but it's impeded. Even living simply without Krishna consciousness, without taking up Krishna consciousness very solidly and very strongly, that won't help us very much. But if we are serious to be Krishna conscious, then living in these communities as Srila Prabhupada recommended will be very helpful. We find from this purport that even before venturing to the West, Srila Prabhupada was very much conscious of the need for establishing simple living, high-thinking communities. And even after going to the West, he wanted to establish such communities. Especially from 1974 onwards, Srila Prabhupada very much stressed the need for establishing Varnashram communities. If we take the time to understand how complex our own thought processes are and how many material attachments we have, we can understand how we really need a strong dose of Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada saw this. He saw that how so many of his disciples, even though they'd come to the level of such a high level of commitment that they were initiated, they would again fall into sense gratification. It's not very difficult, if we look at the situation of the world, to see that it's a complete mess. Chaotic mess. In the name of progress, man has made the whole world more and more unlivable. Srila Prabhupada very kindly gave us a solution. Spiritually, chant Hare Krishna, hear about Krishna. And for bodily maintenance, live in simple communities, devotees together. So, I'm speaking about this again and again. And those devotees who regularly study Srila Prabhupada's teachings, they cannot but note that Srila Prabhupada spoke about this again and again. and some of you are taking this up very seriously. We know that not everyone, not all devotees are going to move to the land and take part in Krishna conscious communities. And we're not so fanatical as to say that you must move to the land, otherwise you're completely doomed. We recognize the dedication and the devotion of devotees, grihastha devotees living in the cities. But at the same time, if these Krishna conscious village communities can develop in an actually Krishna conscious way, then that will provide great spiritual facility for devotees to make advancement. So I congratulate especially present here today Vrajavilas Prabhu and Vishishta Prabhu, who are taking the lead in founding such projects here in Russia and present here now. In many ways, it's not easy to establish such communities. But the payback or the result is that devotees have the opportunity to live together, chant Hare Krishna, hear about Krishna together. Okay, I'll finish there for now. No doubt there could be many, many questions about this. Often very complex questions. Yeah, okay. But yeah, okay, I won't. What we'll do is we'll have a questions and answers session at some point. So if you have any questions, please write them down. Maybe not today, some other day.